The following is a presentation of the Healthcare Facilities Network. Hello, welcome to the Healthcare Facilities Network. I'm your host, Peter Martin of Gosselin Martin Associates and the Healthcare Facilities Network. As always, thank you for clicking on this video, which today is a little bit of a different focus. We're going to talk a bit about change management, and we're going to talk a bit about change management via an interview that Bill Belichick, who was formerly the head coach of the New England Patriots, kind of hurts to say that. We're recording this in January. Earlier this month, probably about 2 weeks ago now, Belichick and the Pats parted ways. They termed it a mutually agreed upon decision, which I kind of believe. Others have said he was fired. I think it's probably semantics at this point, but and Belichick is still out there interviewing, so he hasn't been hired when we are recording this episode. So as a lifelong Patriot fan, our office is in Massachusetts. Our office is about 4 miles from Gillette Stadium, from where the Pats play, 5 miles actually. Grew up in Rhode Island, born in Rhode Island, live in Massachusetts, went to the Midwest for a couple of years, but I've always been a Pats fan, and I'm a Belichick fan. So I think he's the best coach there ever was, and I was kind of sad to see him go. I understand why, and actually that would be a pretty good leadership. That would be a good leadership show too, because there's a lot of issues behind him leaving, and organizational dynamics come into play. So that might be one for a later date. But this particular episode focuses around change management. For some context, this episode was recorded in 2016. And at the time, the Patriots were on a bye week. So Belichick is talking to a local sports radio station here, WEEI, and he's asked a question about how the San Francisco 49ers deal with millennials. And when you're listening to the question, I'm going to play the audio. When you're listening to the questioner is the first voice you will hear, a guy by the name of Jerry Thornton, who's actually at Barstool Sports. Jerry uses the term millennials. And so it was like, the millennials, dreaded millennials. So he's asked about millennials and how the San Francisco 49ers deal with millennials. And he takes that question into an interesting direction that ultimately ends up with Belichick talking about iPads. And so while this is change management, I think in a football context, it really gives a look into the mind of Belichick and how they went about changing the way they conduct business. Now, you're thinking now, so this is 2024. He's talking about iPads back in 2013. This interview is from 2016. It seems easy now, right? It seems an easy decision now. But, if you think about it, Belichick had been in the NFL for 40 years at that time, had done things a specific way. And now here comes technology, which is intruding on how things are traditionally done. And I thought it was a really interesting answer that he gave. This is about change management. And this is how the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick went about implementing iPads to use.
Sort of a bi-week question. Okay. The 49ers this year did a study to learn how to talk to young players coming into the league, millennials, and they talked with sociologists or whatever who told them they need to take regular breaks to get on their phones. So they literally stop meetings every 30 minutes so that their guys can check their social media or whatever. Like, you've been in the league 40 years. Have you found that millennials are different than players used to be? Do you find that, like, as the sociologists said, that their brains are different than they used to be?
Well, that's a really good question, Jerry. I'd say maybe try to answer it two ways. One, I think as a teacher, as a coach, you're always looking to try to find a better way to teach, a better way to get your information absorbed by whoever it is you're giving it to, however that's done. And secondly, I would say that, I've learned that kids now learn differently than they did when I grew up. Maybe they don't learn differently, but their teaching methods are different. So what they're used to doing, what is comfortable for them, what's their normal way of, absorbing information is different than the way I did it. So I don't know if that makes anything right or wrong, but I think, being able to adapt and utilize new teaching techniques, or possibly something that you feel would work better with the group of people that you're working with, I think that's the proactive thing to do. I think that's what you want to do. I mean, in the end, you just want to make sure that the information that you give gets absorbed, not just heard, but actually, absorbed and then is able to be utilized. So whatever that is. And we spent a lot of time talking about that every off season, not just this year or any year, but just, we always talk about that. And sometimes coaches that come from different programs or that have done it differently, have suggestions. Sometimes we adapt them, sometimes we don't, sometimes we modify them, or that type of thing. Putting our playbook on an iPad, which we did that 2 years ago, 3 years ago. That was a big step for me. And I'd say part of the confidence of that for me came from Coach Shiano at Tampa, because that's the way he did it. And, a lot of our coaches felt comfortable with it. I had trouble turning the corner, but, after talking to him, after working with his staff, and, we, kind of exchanged some ideas that year together, and saw it, and saw, and certainly trusted them to say, well, here's what we did, and, this really wasn't a problem. You'll be all right with it. That gave me a lot more confidence to do it. And then, our IT person, Dan Famosi, did a great job of implementing that.
So that was Belichick talking about how he went about implementing a change process. I left on the very end there, he talks about his IT guy, Dan Famosi. I have no idea who that is, but I thought that with IT is always kind of like from a facilities world, we're always blaming IT. They're really an easy target because they have a lot of money. They usually have more staff. They usually come into our closets and our rooms and work sometimes without our knowledge. So I just want to leave the IT part on there as a shout out to any of the IT folks. And as Belichick credited his IT guy. So I think this is Peter Martin. If you or your organization is interested in advertising or partnering with the Healthcare Facilities Network, including sponsoring content, then please email me using the barcode in the lower right of your screen. From the trades level to the vice president level, from planning, design, construction, project management, compliance, safety, and security, the Healthcare Facilities Network reaches FM people where FM people, there's a lot. That was about, I think it's actually 2 minutes and 42 seconds roughly. But I think Belichick gave a pretty good insight into his mindset. So let's look at some of those keys that came out of that 3 minutes with Belichick. So number one, as a teacher, he's always looking for new ways to get information absorbed. I remember when I heard this, what is it, 8 years ago now, and it's probably one of the reasons that I saved it. I was listening to it, and I was like, oh, it's very interesting, because his persona is often seen as a gruff exterior, but obviously that's not who the person is, because you don't achieve that much success if you're just this gruff guy who can't adapt. And so, number one, as a teacher, always looking for new ways to get info absorbed. That's especially true now. That's even more true now than it was 8 years ago. Number two, I thought that was, an interesting part, that players learn differently than when he started. And how do I need to change? I think what this answer shows is it's a constant evolution, and that you constantly have to be changing and open to new techniques, and what are they, and utilize those. I liked when he said their normal and my normal is different. I deal with that, quite often. Obviously, I'm not working in hospitals anymore, consulting firm, but I know I dealt with that. I still deal with that with my kids who are older now, but our normals are just different. And I thought Belichick, said it in a way where he's not really passing a value judgment to it. I think sometimes, it's really easy to say, well, the way we did things was better, or back in my day. That's when you hear all the time, right? Back in my day, things were different and better. And maybe they were, I don't know, but they're gone, right? Whatever that day was is gone. And so you can't let that value judgment that your day was better than their day, you can't let that impact you because you're not going backwards, you're going forward. So how do you change with them? Proactive, being proactive, number 4. In that clip, he said every off season we talk about this. What do we need to change? How do we modify or adapt? I think this can be difficult to do these days, especially in healthcare. You guys working in healthcare facilities management, planning, design, construction, environmental services, you don't have an off season. Every day is the season. But how do you create those opportunities to reflect and grow? Now, some of it is obviously during kind of like after action reports if something major happens. Healthcare, and I'd imagine all industries are pretty good at getting to root cause analysis and looking at things that occurred. But you also want to be doing that, not necessarily reflecting upon the bad things. So how are you proactive, and how do you make time for that? Information mine, he talks about Coach Schiano with Tampa Bay and how, in his implementation of the iPad, he went to coaches from different programs. Healthcare facilities management, if you're new into healthcare facilities management, if you're established into healthcare facilities management, if you're established, that there's a great network of folks who are willing to help. It's one of the great things about this discipline is if you ask a question, people are always willing to help you. So if you're new into healthcare facilities management, whether it's through ASHI or your local engineering chapters, and you can find information on our YouTube channel, Healthcare Facilities Network, about it. But you can always information mine in Healthcare Facilities Network. If you just ask the question, people will answer for you, or people will give you an answer. So I thought those were a couple of interesting change nuggets that Belichick talked about. One of the quotes that I pulled out of that conversation, I've listened to it more than you, so you may not have caught it, but he talked about, I had trouble turning the corner utilizing the iPad. And he turned to Coach Greg Schiano, who was with Tampa Bay at the time, back in 2012 and 2013. And Belichick talked to him. So he was asked a follow-up. Belichick was asked a follow-up question about trouble turning the corner and how did you turn the corner. So we're going to hear the person asking him a question and then Belichick's answer.
What was the hesitation on? You said it took a while for you to turn the corner on the iPads and playbooks. What was?
Well, I mean, things like that always sound good, like, oh, you can do this and you can do that. But there's a big difference between somebody who's, I'd say, not a football person, who's a tech person that says, oh, this is going to be great, you can do this, that, and the other thing, versus somebody like Coach Schiano, who actually is a football person who's done it. Now, when he says, well, you can do this, you can do that because I've done it and our staff does it and our players do it, that carries a lot more weight with me than somebody from some computer company that says, oh, yeah, oh, we can do this, we can do that. I've been down that road before. And what they think they can do, what they actually can do, and what the issues are that come up, a lot of times are different than what they expect. But, in this case, Coach Schiano had used it. His staff had used it. There was security, all the questions that come with it. He had already, he'd already done it. He'd already answered all those questions. So that gave me a level of confidence that was a lot higher than just, hearing it from somebody else that was trying to sell a product.
So I actually love that. That was my favorite answer because there are so many, there in his voice inflection changes. And I have heard directors of facilities that I am working with say something very similar. And this if you're working in it, whether it's a software product, for your work order management, for your PMs. We always deal with the software. Maybe it's your BMS system, but it always sounds good. And you can hear in Belichick's voice. I mean, he even says somebody from some computer company, somebody from some IT company. And he says, things like that always sound good. You can do this and that, but you really can't. So I loved that answer. So what did Belichick do? Again, he went to a trusted source. He went to somebody who had done it before, somebody whose opinion he valued. And I think, it just shows the value of having that network. So utilize your network when needed. whether you're listening to this from healthcare facilities management or some related discipline, there's a network out there. Utilize it. It's one of the key ways to succeed in today's world with short staffs and with competing priorities and with lack of money. Utilize your network. I know a person who was let go from an organization, and one of the things they've done, and I always think, this is, I've talked about this before relative to informationally interviewing. But what he's been doing is utilizing the network, utilizing his network of people to help him think of maybe some new directions to go into, maybe staying in the discipline that he's in, but he's counting and he's utilizing that network. And I think sometimes, pride or whatever it could be, keeps us from utilizing those established networks. So utilize your network. I talked about the informational interview. I've talked about this before. This is another way to utilize a network. Even if you're employed, maybe you're thinking about, okay, do I really want to be a director? Maybe you're a tradesperson and you're thinking about being a director. Maybe you're an FM and you want to go to planning, design, construction. Maybe you're in facilities management and healthcare and you're thinking, do I want to go an academic route? Informationally interviewing is a way to talk to people while you're employed, just to find out information. I've done it before. I can tell you it works. Informationally interviewing is a great way to find out about careers, to learn more without actively looking for a job, because you may determine through your informationally interviewing, okay, I really don't want to go that route. You may think you do, but then you talk to people and you're like, oh, I didn't realize that. So network utilization is really important. Had trouble turning the corner. I'm not a good artist, but you see here, change is never a straight line. And you hear, Belichick talking about it. I had trouble turning the corner. Often we have trouble turning the corner no matter what it is. And so you could make a lot more squiggly lines, but what did he do? He sought information, he accepted the change, they changed the approach, they implemented the iPad in the playbook. They implemented the iPad playbook, excuse me. And now they're using the Surface. So that's what you see on the sidelines all the time. And so it's not a straight line. Change is never easy. Some people hate change. Some people hate the thought of change. As I said, when we were working with the hospital, and this was years ago, it's the stuff that you hear. And again, you've probably heard similar, when they were implementing iPads for work order management, or whether it be your smartphone with work order management, folks were afraid that they were going to be tracked when they go to the bathroom, and they were afraid that they were going to be let go. And so, when you're dealing with change from the management level, you have to accept that your employees, there's real fear there. And so for both the manager who's putting in the change, Bill Belichick, and for the employees who are accepting the change, they can be real fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of change. So these were the nuggets from Belichick. I just added, utilize your network when needed, because no matter where you are in your career, your network that you build and that you have, the healthcare facilities network is hopefully part of it, is always critically important. And network utilization can help you at so many levels of your career. Just wanted to get that out there. As I said, I think it's really Belichick's words or Belichick's insight onto change management I thought was interesting. Hopefully he lands in a good spot. Would like to see him break Don Shula's record and even win a Super Bowl without Tom Brady. So anyways, this is not a football broadcast, but if you have questions or if you have comments or if you want to talk about change or whatever, feel free to reach out to me. We're always here to assist. I thought this would be a little bit different spin on change management from the eyes of a football coach. I'm Peter Martin from the Healthcare Facilities Network. As always, thank you for clicking on this show, and we'll see you again.